I'm Jason Jay. I'm a senior lecturer at the MIT Sloan School of Management, and I'm the director of the MIT Sloan Sustainability Initiative. And today at the McGowan Symposium, I led a workshop on Breaking Through Gridlock, about the power of conversation in a polarized world. There are, I would say, sort of problems at three levels that we're looking to solve. So one is that when people want to go make change in the world, like McGowan fellows are being trained to do, you can't make change in the world without being able to have conversations. And in particular, if you're going to be an ethical leader, if you're going to take on important issues around social justice, environmental sustainability, workplace inclusion, whatever it is that you're passionate about, you're going to find yourself needing to go engage with people in conversation who may not agree with you and who may see things quite differently than you do. Okay, and we're becoming increasingly familiar with this in the context of a polarized political landscape here in the United States and in the UK and around the world. So there's kind of a couple of layers. One is at the individual level to help build people's courage to just go have conversations about values-laden issues that might get hot. The second is at the level of the conversation is how to have that conversation in a way that is productive, that's both effective in moving forward on your goal and that's authentic and relational, right? And it strengthens the relationship as well as moves forward on the issue. And then at the more macro level is if we can develop people's skills to go have these conversations in productive ways, we might be able to get a wider, more inclusive, more productive conversation going about solving big social challenges and creating social movements, whether, again, it's on climate change or diversity and inclusion or economic justice or choose your issue, that those could be just much bigger and more effective than they are now. One of the earlier titles we were playing with for the book was Beyond the Choir, meaning that people have a tendency to be preaching to the choir of others who agree with them. And we wanted to build people's capabilities to go beyond that and create a much more expansive conversation about, what ails us. The basic premise of our work is that the way that we show up in those conversations, our way of being in those conversations, has a huge impact on what we say, what we do, how the conversation goes, and then therefore on the results that we get to have in the world. And that is so what that means is that it requires a bit of reflection to look at a conversation and say, okay, if I've been stuck here, if I've either, this conversation's been going off the rails or I've been avoiding it entirely because I think it might, then I need to sort of take a moment and look at what is my background conversation? What are the thoughts and feelings, the prejudices, the assumptions I have about the other person that I'm not saying? And what's the stance that I'm showing up in, right? We did at the workshop today, I used this online polling tool to ask, what is your way of being in a particular conversation where you've gotten stuck? And what shows up is, defensive, frustrated, condescending, know-it-all, overbearing. And those are ways of being which are going to take things off the rails pretty fast. So the first thing is actually not about having the conversation. It's about pausing and getting much more deliberate about what you want to have happen, what your goals are, what it means to make progress, and then to get much more deliberate about what you're showing up with. And when we get people to reflect on that, they start to notice that, oh, okay, you know what? I've kind of been in this pattern or habit and of showing up in this kind of either more aggressive and condescending way or a kind of more withdrawn and keeping myself removed kind of way, keeping the peace. And so we keep peeling back the layers of the onion and to reflect and say, okay, well, is there something that you're benefiting from out of getting stuck that way? Which is a weird kind of a counterintuitive question to ask. But what you figure out is that people, I want to be right. And I want, I'm comfortable being right and the other person being wrong, being righteous, being certain, I'm comfortable if I can stay safe among my allies, among people who agree with me. And if I want to be right, righteous, certain, and safe more than I want to make progress on the issue or the relationship or both, then I'm going to get stuck. So there's a whole coming to a self-observation in a sense that's needed. That's a preparatory step. And then coming into the conversation with a new way of being, a new approach that you haven't tried before, and that might have you, when I took people through a little meditation exercise to visualize what that way of being could be, and what shows up on the screen is sort of open and supportive and comfortable not knowing. And if people show up with that way of being, then totally new things occur to you to say and do, and then we talk about transformative contrasting. Transformative contrasting is where you explicitly say to the other person, look, you might expect me to show up aggressive and condescending and bullish and certain of my answers, and to just try to score points and be right. And I've done that before, and I'm acknowledging that, and I'm sorry. What I want to do here is something different. I want to approach this conversation in a more open and supportive way, in a collaborative way. And I want to understand more what it is that you value and want to have happen so that we can maybe explore some solutions together. And that is you're drawing a contrast between your old way of being and your new way of being, between how they expect you to be and what you're there to do. And that can be quite powerful. Because then what's happening is that you're letting go of that bait in the trap, that righteous, certain, and safe. And you're helping them let go of, I'm worried you're going to make me give up on this thing I care about, that sort of fear of a trade-off. And then you can both let go and get going. This metaphor about gridlock is really about getting stuck and about not getting to go where you want to go. And so the question is, why do we get stuck and how do we get stuck? And I think that one of the principal ways that we get stuck is that we think that we've got only two choices. We can either keep the peace or we can sort of speak our mind. And if I sort of want to make progress on the issue, I better go in there and speak my mind and let them know what I really think. But if I want to preserve the relationship, I've got to sort of keep the peace. And don't talk politics at the dinner table, stick to the small talk. And we feel stuck because neither of those poles feels like exactly where we want to go. Because if we're keeping the peace, we're not really sharing what we care about. And so therefore, we're not really strengthening the relationship because I'm keeping half of myself out of the conversation. And if I'm speaking my mind, I might be partly speaking my mind about the issue I care about, but I'm not also speaking my mind about the fact that I want to have a good working relationship, and I want those things to, I want, or a good living and family relationship, and I want that to be a harmonious context for both of us and a useful context for both of us. So it's really, I think that is actually the fundamental trade-off that people experience. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to help people see that it's not a one-dimensional picture. It's at least a two-dimensional picture where, okay, there might be different places on this landscape of more speaking my mind and more keeping the peace, but there's something else going on here, which is that really what I care about is strengthening the relationship and moving forward on the issue. And what I want to look for is what you were describing is kind of breaking that trade-off, expanding that frontier, and saying, you know what, I really care about both. I really care about us working together or being together in a family and respecting each other's views. And I also care about, making change on the way that we're using energy or the way that we're including women or the way that, we're allocating our resources across projects that, So it's, I think first is just to clearly state the intention that you want to do both. And then again, take responsibility for the past when you haven't, right? When you've only kept the peace, but sort of quietly been frustrated with them, or when you've been, come in really hot and not really cared what they had to say. and just stating that intention. And that's a fundamentally different place from how most of us approach conversations in a polarized world. One thing that we're afraid to let go of is our own certainty about our own point of view and the feeling of being right and righteous in that point of view, okay? That is a very psychologically comfortable and rewarding place to be. And if you can't just for a moment just kind of release the sort of white knuckle grip on those things a little bit to say, okay, I'm going to be open to how this other person sees the world. What are their experience? What are their life experiences? In this day and age, what news sources are they reading and paying attention to? What fact base are they paying attention to? What do they value and care about that they learned from their father or grandfather or mother or grandmother that they want to make sure they're carrying forward? And then let me just really understand where that person comes from. If I'm sort of in a place where only my perspective and life experience gives me a unique vantage point, and I know I'm right about my point of view, and I have the right and righteous answer, there's no space. So letting go of that is a prerequisite, I think. So then the question becomes, well, how do you let go of it? And the first step is noticing it. The second step is getting clear on what you want more than you want the bait in the trap. And I think I've found in my own practice, I've found that these guided visualizations are super useful. Is just really letting yourself be in a future and take yourself to a future where you've made progress on the relationship and on the issue, and just let yourself be there and think about what becomes available for you, for the other person, for the wider context that you share, for the wider world. When you really dwell in that and you say, wow, it would be amazing if I could have a breakthrough on this, it becomes a little less important to you to be right in the short term. A big part of it is, when are we having a conversation with another human being in which we are not thinking of them as another human being? We're thinking of them as a member of the other political party, the other faction in the organization, the other department that we're at war with, the competitor in our marketplace, but where there's some bigger challenge that our industry has to face. Another socioeconomic, demographic, racial, ethnic group that we feel like ours is not supposed to get along with. And I think that's kind of a key part of this, or generations, right? This person is part of the older generation, I'm part of the younger generation, or I'm part of I think about my kids, like, we're the older generation, they're the younger generation, they don't get it. So anytime, this is kind of, I feel like this is like that, everything I need to know, I learned in kindergarten. It's like the other person is a human being, approach them that way, and not as a category or a caricature. I think that's what is getting us stuck a lot, is this kind of tribalism. And there's, again, all I'm doing here, all that Gabriel, my co-author, and I are doing is trying to give people tools for these one-on-one conversations that can change the space that we're operating in. It is not enough. Social media, anonymity, the sort of filter bubble, the kind of compartmentalization of the mainstream media landscape. There's a lot of bigger forces at play that make this hard. But at the end of the day, I have access to my cousins and uncles who are in the more conservative branch of our family, and they're like, if I can talk to them, it's a different, it's access that I have. So I don't want to say that we have sort of the solution to this whole mess that we're in a polarized country and world, but it might be a piece of it. Power is a funny word. It has a couple of different connotations and meanings in our language. One way of thinking about power is power to, and the other is a power over. So when we think about power in conversations, I think it's very important to focus our attention on power too. In other words, if I want to achieve something, what needs to happen in this conversation for me to be able to get where I want to go and to be effective? And again, where effectiveness means I want to go to this place where our relationship is stronger and we've made progress on the issue. If I can't get where I want to go, I'm powerless, right? And I want to give people power to get where they want to go. And that paradoxically means giving up their power over the other person, right? So if I am going to beat you down with all of my science and graphs and data about climate change and why it's real and why it's important and why it's going to kill us all and why we need to act on it right now, I am exercising a kind of power over you. And then, but if you're somebody who has some uncertainty or some questions about any of that, about the science, about the public policy, about the technology, I'm not making any space for that. Like, we are not going to be powerful together in getting to where we want to go on climate solutions. So, or where I want to go, and then maybe I can try to invite you to be part of that conversation. So there's some of the stuff that we do, like transformative contrasting, when we say, I am sorry for how I've shown up in the past by being overbearing and condescending and know-it-all, and I want to approach this with a new way of being, and I want you to call me on it if you see me slipping into my old habits, okay? I'm giving up power in that conversation. I'm giving up power over, but I'm gaining power to move forward with you on the issue that we care about. So I think that's a really important thing is that we think we have power in conversations by being able to win the debate. And there are some circumstances in which that's absolutely true. That's absolutely the case, and that's the terms of the situation. But in a lot of cases, that's not the case. It's I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to model vulnerability. I'm going to invite you to be vulnerable with me so we can both explore and learn together. And then maybe we can come up with new ideas that we can be aligned around and allied on. And then we'll have more power to do stuff together. So I think that's a reframing of power. Now, all of that said, there's another aspect of power, which is the sociological aspect of power, which is that my power over you or under you, your power over me, isn't just a matter of, am I acting in an aggressive, dominant kind of way? It's also the fact of, am I a part of a disadvantaged group and you're part of a privileged group, right? This is something that I really didn't see as well as I should have or could have, because I am who I am. Like, I'm a straight, cis, white, male American academic in a first-tier city in a top-tier university. Like, there's a lot of things that make me blind to the dynamics of, we walk in a situation and there's already a power dynamic at play. Doesn't mean I've never been in a hierarchy with other senior faculty or whoever, or kind of over my head, and I have to figure out how to be powerful in that conversation. So I think that's how the nuances of how you show up when there is a power differential is kind of the next frontier for our work. But again, I think as long as you follow the similar kind of principle of, I'm going to interact with you as a human being, as opposed to I'm a member of one group and you're a member of the other group, and then therefore this power imbalance is really salient to us. Breaking that script by identifying how we are both something. Maybe we're both fans of the same sports team, or maybe we're both like the same food, or maybe we both live in the same community, or are having to vote in the same election, or dealing with the same storms, right? And this is why the weather is small talk, right? Because it's a common shared thing. So, again, I'm sort of thinking out loud here at a frontier of where this work needs to go. But it, barring any sort of massive and very stuck power differential, I think there is a really clear thing that we see, which is you sort of give up what you think of as some power and you gain more of another kind. And the thing is that showing up, it could be with your boss, it could be with the CEO of the company, it could be across all these different power lines that exist. If I show up in a way of being that's defensive and hostile and overbearing and locked down and closed to any new perspective, it really doesn't matter what the power differential is. I'm not going to be effective. I might show up in the best way of being possible, right? In the most kind of dynamic and open and collaborative and fun, and I might show up in the best way in a way of being that could be super effective and still not get anywhere because they just can't listen to me as a person with whatever my skin color or role or gender might hold them back from seeing. That is a real thing. But I think it's a necessary but not sufficient condition to be empowered over your own way of being. Gabriel Grant and I, my co-author, we started talking about how the traps that we fell into, and we started talking about pitfalls. There's so many pitfalls about being an environmental activist. Going around sort of telling people that they're bad for not recycling. We were just using that word sort of informally, and then we started really thinking about the metaphor of what is a pitfall, which is it's a trap where there's a hole in the ground and you can fall into the hole. And you tend to fall into the hole because there's some bait that's sitting on top of the disguised hole, and you want to go for it, and so you fall into the trap. And then if you're going to stay stuck in the trap, it's partly because you're still excited about this bait that you got. So we just started playing with that metaphor more, and the bait is this idea of that there's some short-term psychological payoff that keeps you stuck. The getting to score points and feel right and righteous, the getting to feel certain and not having to go into that unsafe, uncertain place, that's a short, immediate psychological reward. And if I'm stuck just wanting that reward, then I'm going to stay in this kind of combative, confrontational mode, or just avoid the conversation entirely so I can be very comfortable with my buddies knowing that we're all right. And so there's this letting go of that bait that is required in order to get out of the trap and move forward. That's just a metaphor. But it's sometimes helpful for people to notice that, because they don't even necessarily notice that they were holding on to something. And so that's kind of how we've played with that notion of the bait. To let go of that psychological reward first just means noticing that you are getting it, noticing that you want it, noticing the situations in which you have gotten it, and notice that it's also, I would say, not just a psychological reward, but a sociological reward sometimes in the era of social media. So if President Obama just talked about call-out culture and the sort of challenges with it. And part of what he was pointing out was that if I call out somebody online and sort of criticize someone online, my post might get 157 likes. So I'm not just getting the psychological reward of being right and righteous, but I'm getting other people telling me, go for being right and righteous. And so just noticing, and that might be totally fine. Like that might be what's needed to build power in historically disempowered groups. And it might be the case that when you really start to notice how much of your time and activity and attention is gone into scoring points with people in your group versus really making progress on the issue and getting new people on side and getting, new investments made or new bills passed or new changes in behavior made, then you might notice, well, you know what? It's consuming a lot of my time and attention and energy to do these things that just kind of get me to feel right and righteous and certain and safe, but aren't really getting me moving forward. So the part of it is just looking in the mirror and noticing the patterns. And then I think it is this exercise of really getting present with what am I really trying to have happen here? Why am I having this conversation with this person? What am I up to? What would success really look like? What problem am I trying to solve? If I could visualize myself after this thing going really well, what would become available for me? What would that future look like? And getting clear on that, getting clear on what you really want is incredibly powerful for saying, ugh, I don't need this bait thing. I'm out of here, right? If I think about, I told this story in the workshop about going into the basement and seeing that the lights are on. And then I come up to the I see the lights are on, I go and I turn the switch off. I come up into the kitchen and I see my wife and I say, someone left the lights on in the basement. And then it's like, well, okay, so what am I really trying to accomplish there? Am I really trying, on one level, I want people to turn the lights off so we can save some energy and carbon in the house. On the other level, I'm sort of securing my position as the, sort of guardian of green and the eco warrior in the household. And so if I really get present to like, okay, wait, if I could really achieve my goals, what do I really care about here? It's something different. She and I both share a view that we want our family and our household to be a positive impact in the world. We want to have a positive contribution in the world. We want to raise our kids to be a positive contribution in the world. And so we want to look for ways, big and small, to do that together. And we want to cheer each other on and being effective in doing that. So let's figure out how to do that, and let's problem solve it together and not have it be about, whether I managed to get her this time. Her response was, well, someone left the light on in the shower this morning and, I just turned it off. Which is fun. She's got a great sense of humor, and so we can do that back and forth. And that's great, but it's still sort of, again, it's like the push-pull, the scoring points. And she's kind of calling me out on the scoring points thing. So then it's like, okay, well, let's figure this out together. The next time we remodel, maybe we can put, or even just now, let's put some motion sensors down there so we don't have to worry about it. So stuff like that. If there's one phrase that kind of summarizes how to move forward, it's we have to let go to get going. And what do I mean by that? It's that we have to let go of the bait and the trap. Let go of being right, righteous, certain, and safe. Let go of the prejudices and background conversations about the other person, and show up with a new approach. We also have to help them let go of the fear that we're going to take them down some road they don't want to go down. That there might be some trade-off they have to make that we're forcing them to make. So help them let go of the fear of making a trade-off. And then we can invent together. We can invent new solutions together that neither of us could have thought of alone. And when we do that, our relationship will be stronger for it. Or at minimum, we will understand and respect each other's different points of view. And in this climate, that would be major progress.